Does Cory Sandhagen have the stuff, have the juice to solve the riddle of a Merab Dvalishvili, who's on quite an impressive winning streak in the bantamweight division?
I think he does. Sandhagen's one of my favorite fighters to watch. He's a very, very good problem solver in the moment. He's good at reading what's in front of him and adapting his technique. The one that springs out to me is the Moraes head kick. He set him up with that back kick a few times, went high, took his head off. He's very good at adapting. And the thing with Merab, because he's got a very high pace, he keeps going constantly. So there's like almost like a subconscious motor that's running. And that subconscious motor can be a little bit predictable. So someone like Sandhagen's going to see rhythms. Maybe he bops his head in a particular way at a particular time each time, or every time he throws one shot, he's going to do something afterwards. Sandhagen's the kind of guy that's going to see these patterns and have traps laid out for them. So I'm expecting knees and uppercuts and damaging things up the center channel, and elbows on the inside.
And you think we hear Anu because of this?
I think so. I love Merab, but I just feel like his constant work rate can sometimes get him in trouble. And someone as smart as Sandhagen that's got the tools in the bag in every single range, I think he might cause the upset.
Ilia Topuria, he's the champ in the lightweight division. We don't know who he's fighting next. If you were a betting man, if you were the matchmaker, who do you think's most deserving to be fighting him next?
Man, that's a good question. I would need to look at the rankings, to be honest. I mean, who are the top 5 right now?
Arman Tsarukyan, who was supposed to fight Islam Makhachev the beginning of the year, obviously pulled out with a back injury. Yeah. Charles Oliveira's got a date with Fiziev, so those guys are at the top right now. Arman might be the clearest #1, but then there's Justin Gaethje, there's Paddy the Baddy Pimblett.
I'd like to see Gaethje versus Pimblett. Of course, that makes sense. If Fiziev comes through Oliveira, that makes a lot of sense for him to get an opportunity. Tsarukyan versus Makhachev, that was one of the fights that I called back in my UFC days. It was one of the best fights.
Over in Abu Dhabi, short notice fight, Arman Tsarukyan's debut in the UFC. You were on the call.
It was amazing. The speed that they wrestled at, it was incredible. And he was only just a fraction behind Makhachev at the time, right? Makhachev was just able to pip him in each one of those exchanges. I'd love to see Tsarukyan get the opportunity as long as he can stay healthy, you know.
And does he have what it takes to become the champion and dethrone Ilia Topuria?
I don't know. I think Topuria at this weight class, I think welterweight would be a step too far for him, but lightweight Topuria, with the power that he's got with his neck attacks, I think he holds the belt for a while.
So what do you think that Alex Pereira needs to do this time around to get his hand raised and win that title back?
I think he needs to close the range down a little bit. You know, I think maybe he had a little bit too much respect for Ankalaev in the last fight. I also think he wasn't quite sure which hand Ankalaev was going to play. You know, and Ankalaev is very, very confident as a striker. His wrestling's always been a backup in his game, and he's never particularly wanted to use it too much. But just the idea of it being there, the threat, I don't know, it seemed to make Pereira just kind of hesitate a little bit too much. And Pereira, when he's at that close range, either when you're coming to him, like when Strickland fought him, Strickland was walking into his range, or when someone's moving away and he's walking into their range, like Jamal Hill, it's that, like, you feel that pressure of his kind of frame coming at you, and people feel like they need to react. And what I love about it, there's really good videos of him training online where he slips offline and counters with power punches, and the slip of the punch loads the power punch to come back. So his ability at close range to not only kind of bear over people and make them anxious, but also to pressure them to throw, in which case he feeds off it and works with counters. Like, if I'm Pereira, I would be thinking about getting as close to him as possible, getting in his face, maybe even try and use a bit of tie clinch just to kind of, you know, manage the clinch a bit. But I would also think that he's going to be better defending takedowns on the front foot as well, right? You know, better if he's pressuring forward and forcing Ankalaev to shoot under pressure. That would be my thought process, but I don't know. I mean, we might see a very different Ankalaev this time around, you know, and that's also something that Pereira's got to adapt to in that first round.
Khamzat Chimaev just beat DDP. Do you think that he remains, you know, champion for a while, or do you think who has a good chance of dethroning him?
I mean, I think there's a couple of interesting ones. You know, Derrida's an interesting one purely because of his size and his reach and his awkwardness on the ground. You know, he has a lot of very tricky stuff from like an open guard position. We saw a lot of that before he left One Championship. So I certainly think he could be an interesting problem and someone that could keep the fight moving on the floor and you know, cause problems for Chimaev that he's maybe not experienced before. I also think, you know, we've got to keep an eye on Fluffy Hernandez. You know, like he's one of those guys that you underestimate him when he gets in there. You hit him with 100 shots, and the next thing you're tired, and he's coming back at you and he's strangling the life out of you. like the middleweight division's in a bit of a weird transition at the moment. I feel like a couple of the older guard, like they've kind of phased out, and they're making some space for some of the new guys coming in. But I mean, to be honest, I think at this point right now, Chimaev stays the champion unless he steps outside of himself and makes a mistake. Does that make sense? Yeah. And I think, that could be a thing. He could get pressure from the outside. He could get pressure from the fans for fighting safe and decide he wants to stand and trade with someone that's going to clip him, or there are lots of different ways that it could play out. But I think at this point, Chimaev only beats himself, and I think he's going to hold the belt for as long as he can stay disciplined.
Well, you mentioned RDR, you mentioned Fluffy. I know they're fighting next month. And then also Imavov just won this past weekend. Who do you think would be most deserving to fight Chimaev next?
That's a good question. I mean, Imavov looked good. I thought, to be honest, he could have opened up a bit more. I thought there were times where he could have really put his foot on the gas. But then, 25 minutes fighting at home is a different kind of pressure. I don't know, to be honest. I mean, it's difficult to say. I think Hernandez has got interesting momentum right now, and I think there are a lot of people that would be like, okay, this is an interesting problem. But then if Derrida comes through and looks great, especially if he wins by submission, I think he's the obvious next one. For me, Imavov is going to keep it on the feet, and he's most likely going to get taken down, and he's most likely going to be dealing with the same problems as DDP was. Whereas Derrida has got an entirely different skill set, and he's a very different shape and build. So for me, if he beats Hernandez, he's the number one pick.
Islam, he's moving up to 170. He's going to be fighting JDM for that title. Do you think he gets the job done, or how do you see the fight playing out?
Man, I've been high on JDM for a long time. I remember doing interviews back when Ngannou was crossing over to boxing, and people were talking about who's got the best hands in MMA. And I was saying JDM at the time. I mean, his boxing's always impressed me. But at this point, I feel like Islam's moving up a weight class at the right time. There are a lot of fighters that stay in a weight class for too long, and they seem to kind of stifle their physical growth. I don't think Islam can stay healthy and stay in that lightweight division for any longer. And I think right now he's allowed himself to move into a division where his body's just going to grow into it. He's going to be incredibly powerful. And I just think Islam's all-round game is so problematic for any single fighter. I see him taking it. And I can see him probably a 50-50 striking exchange, Makhachev winning with a kicking advantage, but then he's grappling and his wrestling taking over, probably winning by sub in the championship rounds.